Household spending power is likely to shrink further as inflation shaves incomes by 1.2%, the highest in 2 years. New data by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has confirmed the pain of many Kenyans who continue to pay more for transport, food, and energy. The statistics tell a grim story of eroding purchasing power as Kenya's inflation rate jumps to 5.6% in April 2026 from 4.4% in March this year, the highest ever since May 2024, and it's driven by sharp increases in food and fuel costs. As Esther Diana now reports, essentials remain out of reach for many.
Kenyans continue to grapple with high cost of living as inflation in April hits a record 5.6%, further worsening the living standards. Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi has sold fears that inflation could spike in the coming month, further shrinking disposable incomes as the impacts of the escalating tensions in the Middle East come to percolate at home here in Kenya, increasing the cost of fuel.
In the month of April, inflation has jumped to 5.6%. January 4.4%, February 4.3%, March 4.4%, now April 5.6%. And with the possibility that it can go a little higher in the month of May.
Amid rising inflation, workers in the agriculture, forestry and fishing sector, which contributes the lion's share to the country's GDP, are struggling to afford the same food items which they produce and process. Earnings for people employed in the sector have been on the decline over the last 5 years, eroding their purchasing power.
The agricultural sector slowed down from 4.4% to 3.1% from the previous quarter to the next quarter. That is the fourth quarter, because of drought. And that explains why even the manufacturing sector slowed from 3% to 2%, because manufacturing sector goes hand in hand largely with the agricultural sector, Kenya being heavily dependent on agriculture.
The reduced disposable income for basic needs is in addition to new and higher deductions, including the 1.5% affordable housing levy, 2.75% social health insurance fund, and rising NSSF contributions. The Economic Survey 2026 shows that total average earnings per employee grew to 678,000 shillings in 2025 from 665,000 shillings in 2024. For workers, however, this growth remains elusive in their earnings.
The manufacturing sector is actually accounting for the larger number. So when you're looking for areas that you can use to employ more people, then it's quicker when you go the manufacturing way.
In April 2026, fuel costs, which rippled through nearly every sector of the economy, surged dramatically. Diesel prices jumped 19.4% year-on-year to 197.81 shillings per litre, while petrol rose 13.3% to 198.67 shillings per litre.
On the stabilization fund, in that fund, when we start to make this decision, we had 17 billion in that kitty. If prices were to remain the way they were from March to April 14th, we were to spend 14 billion out of that 17 billion.
Today, a kilo of tomatoes now cost 108.6 shillings, up 32% from 81.8 shillings a year ago, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. The price of potatoes have also risen 17.4% to 110 shillings a kilo, while beef with bones has climbed 11% to 749 shillings. For ordinary Kenyans, the impact is immediate. City bus and matatu fares in Nairobi increased 20% year-on-year. Today, matatu fare to the city center from Karen cost 120 shillings. Household budgets have been squeezed further The report shows a 13 kilogram of cooking gas cylinder now retails at 3,361 shillings, up 6.5% from a year ago. It is also projected that food prices could spike further as a result of disruptions in fertilizer supply chains, worsening food insecurity. Currently, Kenya sources 26% of its fertilizer imports from the Middle East. According to economist and Kiharu Member of Parliament Ndindi Nyoro, President Ruto's economic performance in the first 3 years is not as expected compared to the previous governments of President Kibaki and President Uhuru. In a statement released today, Nyoro says in order for the country to reverse the deteriorating economy, it must focus on growing productivity, ensuring the manufacturing sector grows. He adds that the government must also slow down on borrowing, note that the country is in debt stress.
There is no two way about it. If economy grew at 4.6, I can't change it and make it 5.9, even though that is what I desire.
The World Bank, on the other hand, has warned that Kenya's economy could worsen given the country remains highly vulnerable to global supply shocks as a net importer. Esther Diana, KTN, Nairobi.